I hope you're enjoying Sports World on the 7 Network around Australia. It's hard to believe, but it was 20 years ago this weekend that England and Australia were locked in that historic Centenary Cricket Test at the Melbourne Cricket Ground. In 1877, Australia won the first test between the two countries by 45 runs, and 100 years later did it again. Amazingly, the winning margin was the same. As David Fordham takes a wander down memory lane, he reports it was more than a test of coincidence, but one of outstanding personal performance, of high drama, fluctuating fortune, and most importantly, a test match befitting the historic occasion.
A test match that was going to be looked at differently in hindsight. You know, 20 years down the track, we're going to talk about this test match, not many others. And I didn't want to be on the losing side.
It was just marvellous being part of it, and one always felt right at the beginning that it was going to be an interesting test match, because we were confident actually, and despite the fact that I think the Aussies were probably a better side on paper.
The first test match in Australia between the home country and arch rival England was played in Melbourne from the 15th to the 18th of March 1877. Australia won that match by 45 runs. 100 years later, the living legends of the game gathered in Melbourne to celebrate the centenary, and it proved to be a special test match befitting the history and the traditions of the game. Day one, and 60,000 fans awaited the outcome when rival skippers Tony Greig and Greg Chappell tossed the commemorative coin. Greg won the toss and sent Australia into bat. Some critics suggested Greg's decision was defensive, opting to keep his top order away from Dennis Lillee.
Partially true. I mean, you know, one has to be sensible. And one of those cynics was Jeff Boycott, who was sitting up in the commentary box commentating when he should have been playing with us. You know, all this king and country talk that emanates from Boycott, I remember thinking at the time, what's he doing up there? He should be here. We need an opener.
Australia was struck a cruel blow early. Rick McCoskin deflected the ball into his stumps after having his jaw broken by Bob Willis.
Yeah, I mean, he got hit in the head. Well, that can happen. But then he got out and we lost the wicket, and I thought, God, how unlucky is that? But when we saw him, when he came in, it was more than that. I mean, he was a very sick boy.
That was the start of a dismal day for Australia and a glory day for England. Superb catching and a fine spell of fast bowling by John Lever cut a swathe through the Australians. All out, 138.
Runs were hard to come by, but I think it was also a bit of the tightness that we all felt from the occasion.
But for Tony Greig, his decision earlier in the day, totally justified.
I felt fantastic, and so did all of us. The bowlers bowled very well, but the thing that also stands out in my mind was the catching.
Little did he know, but Tony Greig's smile from day one was to quickly disappear on day two. The MCG fans gave heroes Dennis Lillee and Max Walker enormous support as the tables turned. Resuming at 1 for 29, even the most ardent Australian fans would not have envisaged what lay ahead. Lillee, in full flight, grabbed 6 wickets, Walker 4, England out for 95.
You mentioned Dennis and Max Walker, they bowled pretty well. Our fielding was very good. We took some good catches. And, you know, I think, you know, we were starting to get into the game at that stage too. The environment, the hype that was going on, the excitement around the ground.
And when Rod Marsh took the catch to end England's innings, he went into the history books breaking the late Wally Grout's record for test dismissals by a keeper.
But I do recall when I did take that catch, everyone sort of rushed over to me and congratulated me, except for Doug Walters, who hung back a little bit. And eventually Dougie came over and he put his arm on my shoulder and he said, Bacchus, you know, if you'd have caught all those ones in the first test match you played, you'd have passed Wally's record a long time ago.
I'll never forget that night that they'd bowled us over. The Poms were sitting in the bar at the Hilton and having a couple of ales and were so happy with themselves. And the next night, when we knocked them over for about 90 or 100 or whatever it was, I looked in the bar to see if they were there. They weren't.
No one there.
No, I wanted to have a couple of beers with them then.
The Australians continued what seemed a stranglehold on this historic test match on day 3. It was a day best remembered for a cameo role by a test debutant, David Hooks, who turned the match on its ear with a swashbuckling half-century.
I was in an atmosphere of everybody being apprehensive and nervous and excited, so it wasn't quite as difficult as what I perhaps thought.
So much so, his innings included 5 consecutive boundaries off a hapless Tony Gregg.
Margot this time, it's going out to the fence, it could be the third 4 in a row.
And I think a little bit of needle from Tony Gregg got David going, and that innings and that particular over, you know, still stand out very strongly in my mind. And
yeah, I'm reminded of that regularly as well. It was tremendous attacking batting. He was a refreshing young man. I remember when he first came into bat, actually, I hovered on his nose at Silly Point and made some comment about whether or not his testicles had dropped yet. And his return comment was fantastic. He said, he just looked me in the eye and said something to the effect that at least I'm playing for the country I was born in, you know, something like that. So he was pretty good with returning the compliment.
Well, I actually started here at the MCG at dinner the night before the game, and he sort of looked through me and said that Australia's picked another left-hander that can't bat. And I looked around expecting to see Gary Gilmore or Rod Marsh, but they weren't there, so I knew that he was talking about me.
Marsh at the other end, though, gathered in confidence from hooks as he moved towards another personal milestone. The first Australian keeper to score a Test 100. But with Australia moving into an impregnable position, Rick McCosker joined the fray, broken jaw and all. His gutsy 25, vital to Australia's cause, and a tremendous show of courage.
I'll tell you, that was, he put a lump in my throat. That was for his country, for sure.
At stumps, Marsh remained 95 not out as the players enjoyed the then traditional rest day. That night, the players from eras past and present relived the 100 years of arch rivalry. For the England skipper, a rare honour at the centenary dinner, seated next to the greatest of them all, Sir Donald Bradman.
Len Hutton was still alive as well. Alec Betzer was there. I mean, it was Godfrey Evans, Dennis Compton. It was a very special time.
But when the game was to restart, England, who had dominated on day 1, certainly had the job ahead of them.
on the last day, I didn't think they were. I really thought they were in the box seat, to be fair.
When you were here before.
As the players celebrated the 100 years at the Centenary dinner, some knew the game was about to change forever. The Rebel World Series cricket, or Kerry Packer's circus, was rearing its head.
A lot of us obviously had been approached and had made a commitment to join World Series cricket at that stage, but it didn't make any difference to our commitment to Australian cricket and to that Test match and to ourselves. I mean, there was a lot of personal pride at stake.
I knew that it was happening. I actually got my offer at tea time on the last day as I was walking out. What's going on here, you know?
Surprisingly, two people who were later to be key men in the World Series movement were still very much in the dark.
I've been accused of knowing about it, but I knew nothing about it. I met Kerry Packer for the first time in Sydney straight after that Test match.
At that stage, how much did you know what was happening in the future?
Nothing. In fact, it wasn't for several weeks that I knew anything about it, but obviously from things I've read since, some of the players knew, not all of them.
When play resumed on day 4, it didn't take Rod Marsh long to rewrite the history books.
Rod got 100. I mean, he deserved to get 100. He played some really good knocks for Australia over the years, and it was nice that he got 100 in that big match. I'm sure he remembers it very fondly.
But to score a maiden Test 100 in a Centenary Test match, I suppose you've had time to reflect on that now. It's a pretty fair achievement.
Yeah, I'll never do it again.
Greg Chappell's declaration set England a target that had never been achieved by a side batting second in the 100 years between the two countries. But such was the spirit of this historic match that England certainly took up the challenge.
Well, there was going to be a winner. There was no point trying to do it any other way. You know, the pitch wasn't too bad. I mean, everyone told me it was going to really keep low and levels to problems. That old novel wicket was superb wicket.
The challenge was taken up by the perky Derek Randall, who helped take England to stumps at 2 for 191. Australia's lead was cut to just 273, and that had seemed quite realistic for England with a day to go.
I still felt that the odds were in our favour, but at the tea time on the last day I didn't think they were. I really thought they were in the box seat, to be fair.
The final day of this historic test was to be drama charged. took up the challenge with a brilliant 174 to earn the man of the match honours.
That was one of the best Test innings that I'd seen from somebody with so little experience in Test cricket. You know, his temperament was just as important to him that day as his physical talent, and he, you know, very nearly won it for him.
It was a plucky innings. I mean, the guy just took us by the scruff of the neck and said, I'm just going to go for it. I don't care what happens. I'm going to play all my shots and take it to the bowlers.
However, with the match evenly poised, a great display of sportsmanship by Rod Marsh saw Randall recall to the crease after being given out caught behind by umpire Tom Brooks. But Marsh claimed the ball didn't carry.
He come up with the ball, I ran up to him and started to congratulate him, and he said, mate, that wasn't out.
They called him back in. It was a tremendous gesture from Marshy, but Chappell's reaction, because of the tenseness of this whole thing, was quite interesting. He started to question whether Rodney Marsh had gone all religious or something at that stage of his career.
In the end, though, it was that man Lilly with 5 second innings wickets to give him 11 for the match who saw Australia home.
And in those days, it was actually back to work. You know, you jump in the plane the next day, and the next day you're in the office. And so you haven't got much time to think about it.
In another fairy tale Test statistic, Australia's winning margin of 45 runs was the same winning margin of the first Test match 100 years before. An amazing coincidence.
Well, that is just incredible. I mean, I didn't even know about that until after the games. That's just unreal.
I had no idea, and it was just, it was quite eerie actually, spooky.
And so, another chapter in Anglo-Australian Tests was completed. Many will argue there have been better Test matches, but few will doubt this epic battle in Melbourne was to be one of the most memorable.
Great story from David Fordham. I think if it was a Hollywood movie, you wouldn't believe it. There were so many elements, but it did happen 20 years ago this weekend, that Centenary Test. A remarkable athlete is Emma Carney. She's already represented Australia in 2 sports, athletics at world cross-country level, and also in triathlon, where she was the world champion in 1994 and has been the world #1 for the last 3 years. There might be a chance she'll go in another sport in a couple of years' time. Emma joins us this morning from Melbourne. Mountain